So we're making good progress here. Now let's just make sure that we can submit this form and that validation works correctly, especially when we're thinking about these dates. Now, for the form submission, I got this button here with type submit, and therefore on the wrapping form element, we can add ng submit, and then reference a method that should be executed when the form is submitted. And here, this will be my onBookPlace method. Since I'm using the template-driven approach, I want to forward a reference to my form. So I'll again add that local reference here, f, and I could now use this ngForm assignment again and pass it here as an argument. But I'll actually not do that. I will still assign ngForm here because I absolutely need access to that form object Angular created behind the scenes, but I'll access it differently in the TypeScript file because I will actually not just need access to that form here in onBookPlace, but also in another function which I'll add, which is there to validate my controls. Because right now, when I want to disable my button here, when the form is invalid, I can of course do this as before by checking if not f is valid, and f is that local reference I just added. Now I can do that, but the problem we face is that if this reloads here, let me show what the problem is. No matter which date mode I enter, I can enter something here that looks good. It's like 3 guests or 2 or 1, doesn't matter. And now let's select the date. And now let me pick the last date first. Let's say we have February the 1st here. And then I pick a from date that is actually March 1st. And that works due to how my pickers work. And yes, you could try to add more complex logic to see which picker was changed to then update the other picker, but I don't have that logic here. So now I effectively have a combination that's not possible. The from date is after the to date, and yet this is enabled. And I can't really check this with my normal validation directives. So I will write my own helper function here in the TypeScript code where I want to compare dates manually and pass back the information whether the date selection is valid or not. And for this, I need to be able to read the date values, which I can do by getting access to the form. And you can get access to any element in your template with the add_viewChild decorator. And that is a normal Angular feature, not related to Ionic. You need to import it from @AngularCore, and this allows you to define a selector up here, not a CSS selector though, but for example, the name of one of your local references. So f in my case. And if I would have named this differently here in the template, up there, if I would have named it differently here, then I would have to use that name here. Now this is my form, and it is of type ngForm, which you need to import from @AngularForms. And now I have access to that form here in my entire TypeScript file, and therefore I can now add a little helper utility method in here, which I'll name datesValid, where I will get my start date that was selected by using this form value, and then I'm looking for date-from, and here you should choose the name which you chose in your template. So I simply chose date_from and date_to here. So these are the names I'll also use down there. And that is a string. I need a date object here, so let's wrap this into a new date call. And then I want to get my end date in the same way. So new date for this form value date_to. And here I now just return the result of a comparison. I compare if end date is greater than start date, and only if that is the case, this is valid. And now with datesValid added here, back in the form, I can use this validation on the button too. So the button is disabled if the form is not valid, or if not, datesValid. Now with that, let's see if it works by going back and checking that logic again here. Select the date, fill valid values into all the other inputs, and then here for 2, I'll select February the 1st, and then I'll pick a starting date that is after February, and indeed now it is disabled until I pick a valid end date again. So this looks better. Now we can also use the booked button, of course. That works. It triggers the already existing onBookPlace method. But now let's also make sure we extract the data here and pass it back to the component that actually opened this modal. In onBookPlace, I first of all want to add validation again, and I want to check if not form is valid, this form is valid, or if not dates, this dates valid. So if either of the two is not valid, I'll return, because maybe you manually enabled the button in the developer tools and submitted the form through that. Well, I'm not playing the game, I'm not giving you access. So if you made it past the if check, the inputs are valid, and then I want to pass that data back to whoever opened that modal. Previously I passed this dummy message, now we can pass back more useful things. We can pass back our booking data here, and you can name this key however you want. And that will be an object where I want to have the key value pairs containing the values entered by the user. Like the first name, which is this form value, and then we access the first name input or control. And I mentioned this before, but it is important. The keys you're targeting here, of course, have to match the names you chose in your template. So here I choose first name written like this as a name, hence this is my key here. And because of the dash, I have to use the square brackets notation. I also have my last name here. So this form value last name. Then we have the guest number here, which is this form value. Let's see, what did I choose there? I chose guest number as a name, so we should use that here as well. Guest number, and then we have our dates. And there we have the start date, which is this form value date from. And then we have the end date, which of course is this form value, form value date 2. That is the data I want to pass back. Now in the place where I opened that modal, so in the place detail page, there I present the modal and I do already log the data I get back. So we should see that data once I now submit a valid modal. So let's go with the random date so that I don't have to fill this out manually. And I'll enter my name here. I'm coming with my partner and I book this. And here is our booking data. And this looks good, I'd say. Looks good to me. Should be the data I entered. So this is now the last form I wanted to work on in this module.